and the chief sponsor of this legislation, Mr. Sensenbrenner.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 6 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the House for bringing the USA Freedom Act to the floor today. I was the chairman of the Judiciary Committee on September 11, 2001. In the wake of that tragedy, the committee passed the Patriot Act with unanimous bipartisan support. The bill easily passed in both the House and the Senate, and President George W. Bush signed it into law. I believe the Patriot Act made America safer by enhancing the government's ability to find and stop terrorist attacks. We were careful to maintain the civil liberties that distinguished us from our enemies. We're here today because the government misapplied the law and upset the balance between privacy and security that we had thought to preserve 13 years ago. In a feat of legal gymnastics, the administration convinced the FISA court that because some records in the universe of every phone call Americans made might be relevant to counterterrorism, the entire universe of calls must be relevant. That decision opened the floodgates to a practice of bulk collection that Congress never intended when the Patriot Act was passed. Senator Leahy and I introduced the USA Freedom Act to end bulk collection, increase transparency, and to reestablish a proper balance between privacy and security. After months of input and negotiations, in an historic echo of its Patriot Act, the Judiciary Committee unanimously passed the Freedom Act. The challenge we faced was to draft legislation that was tight enough to avoid abuse without infringing on the core function of law enforcement and intelligence collection. Perfect is rarely possible in politics, and this bill is no exception. In order to preserve core operations of the intelligence and law enforcement agencies, the administration insisted on broadening certain authorities and lessening certain restrictions. Some of the changes raised justifiable concerns, and I don't blame people for losing trust in their government because the government has violated their trust. Let me be clear. I wish this bill did more. To my colleagues who lament the changes, I agree with you. To privacy groups who are upset about lost provisions, I share your disappointment. The negotiations for this bill were intense. We have to make compromises, but this bill still does deserve support. Don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. Today we have the opportunity to make a powerful statement. Congress does not support bulk collection. The days of the NSA indiscriminately vacuuming up more data than it can store will end with the USA Freedom Act. After the Freedom Act passes, we will have a law that expresses Congress's unambiguous intent to end bulk collection of Americans' data across all surveillance authorities. The bill requires that, in addition to existing restrictions, the government must use a specific selection term as the basis for collecting foreign intelligence information. And maybe more importantly, after this bill becomes law, we will have critical transparency provisions to ensure that if the government again violates our trust, Congress and the public will know about it and will be able to do something about it. The Freedom Act gives private companies greater discretion to disclose their cooperation with the government. These disclosures give the companies increased autonomy and will alert the public to the extent of data collection. The bill also requires public notification of any FISC decision that contains a significant construction of law, expressly including interpretations of, quote, specific selection term, unquote. This is the end of secret laws. If the administration abuses the intent of the bill, everyone will know. That's why the Freedom Act will succeed. It bans bulk collection and ensures disclosure of attempts to dilute it. Today's vote is the first step and not a final step in our efforts to reform surveillance. It gives us the tools to ensure that Congress and the public can provide an adequate check on the government. In the post-Freedom Act world, we have turned the tables on the NSA and can say to them, we are watching you, and we will. I want to thank Chairman Goodlatte Ranking Member Conyers and Congressman Scott, Nadler, and Forbes of Virginia for all their hard work. I also want to thank the staff for so many long hours. I cannot overstate the amount of collective sweat and tears that my Chief of Staff, Bart Forsyth, Carolyn Lynch, Sam Raymer, Aaron Hiller, Heather Sawyer, and Joe Graupensberger put in this bill. But most of all, I want to thank my wife. Cheryl has always been the world's largest and loudest advocate for the preservation of civil rights. She encouraged, supported, and some might say demanded that I lead this effort. There is no question that we would not be here today for this historic vote on the USA Act if it weren't for her. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.